Chapter 5. The Ritual. Free? The free things are the most expensive. Steve muttered silently, determined to reject any additional services no matter what. You think you can predict I'm a time traveler? Quote. With that thought, Steve followed the woman with red and yellow face paint into a low tent. The inside of the tent was very dark, with only a little light seeping in, faintly illuminating a table covered with tarot cards. The woman, wearing a pointed hat, was unaffected. Her black dress fluttered like water around the table as she sat opposite him and lit a candle. The dim, flickering light added a mysterious aura to the tent. Steve sat down quietly, his gaze sweeping over the tarot cards on the table, recognizing familiar major arcana like the Magician, the Emperor, the Hanged Man, and Temperance. Could Comrade Rosal really be a senior? I wonder if he is from my big foodie empire, Steve murmured, momentarily lost in thought. Before he could finish looking at the spread cards, the woman, known for her accurate predictions, gathered all the tarot cards, stacked them, and pushed them towards him. You shuffle and cut the cards, the circus fortune teller said in a husky voice. Me? Shuffle? Steve asked instinctively. The fortune teller's face paint moved as she smiled faintly and said, Of course. Everyone's fate can only be predicted by themselves. I'm just an interpreter. Steve immediately became wary and asked, Interpreting doesn't come with an extra charge, does it? Quote. As a keyboard folklorist, I've seen plenty of these tricks. The fortune teller paused for a moment before replying in a muffled voice. It's free. Relieved, Steve pushed his revolver deeper into his pocket, then calmly extended his hands and skillfully shuffled and cut the cards. All done, he said, placing the shuffled tarot cards in the middle of the table. The fortune teller clasped her hands, stared at the cards for a while, and then suddenly asked, Sorry, I forgot to ask, what do you want to predict? Quote. Having researched tarot cards when he was unsuccessfully chasing his first love, Steve didn't hesitate to say, the past, the present, and the future. This is a tarot spread that uses 3 cards to symbolize the past, present, and future. The fortune teller nodded. Then her lips curved into a smile and said, Then please shuffle the cards again, knowing what you want to ask, so you can shuffle out cards that truly have symbolic meaning. You were just playing me. Huh. All because I kept emphasizing it was free. Steve's facial muscles twitched. He took a deep breath, took back the tarot, and shuffled and cut the cards again. This time it's okay, right? He placed the cut cards on the table. No more, said the fortune teller as she picked up a card from the top and placed it to Steve's left, her voice growing huskier. This card symbolizes the past. This card symbolizes the present, she said, placing another card in front of Steve. She picked up a third card and placed it to Steve's right. This card symbolizes the future. All right, which card would you like to see first? After doing all this, the fortune teller lifted her head and looked deeply at Steve with her gray-blue eyes. Let's see the present first, Steve thought for a moment. The fortune teller slowly nodded and turned over the card in front of him. The card depicted a young person wearing splendid clothing, a dazzling headdress, a staff on their shoulder with a bag hanging from it, and a small dog pulling at the back. The number was 0. The fool, the fortune teller said softly, her gray-blue eyes fixed on Steve. The fool? The 0 card of tarot? The beginning? Encompassing all possible beginnings? Steve, hardly a tarot enthusiast, could only interpret based on his impressions. Just as the fortune teller was about to speak, the tent's fabric door was suddenly thrown open, and strong sunlight streamed in, causing Steve, who was facing away, to instinctively squint. Why are you impersonating me again? Doing fortune telling is my job. A woman's angry voice shouted. Go back. Remember. You're just a beast tamer. Quote, a beast tamer? As Steve adjusted to the light, he saw a woman at the entrance, also wearing a pointed hat and black dress, painted with red and yellow face paint, but taller and slimmer. The woman sitting in front of him quickly stood up, saying regretfully, don't mind. I just like this. I have to say, sometimes, my predictions and interpretations are quite accurate. Really. She said this as she lifted her skirt and quickly left the tent from the side. Sir, would you like me to interpret for you? The real fortune teller asked Steve with a smile. Steve moved his lips, sincerely asking, is it free? Quote, no, the real fortune teller replied. Then forget it. Steve stuffed his hands back into his pockets, pressing against the revolver and coins, and bent over to leave the tent. To think they had a beast tamer doing tarot readings. A beast tamer who doesn't want to be a fortune teller isn't a good clown. Right? Steve quickly put this incident behind him. At the lettuce and meat market, he spent 7 pennies on a pound of not-so-good lamb meat, plus tender peas, cabbage, onions, potatoes, and the previously bought bread, spending a total of 25 copper pennies, or 2 shillings and 1 penny. Money really doesn't last. Poor Benson. Steve not only spent the 2 bills he brought with him but also a penny from his trouser pocket. He casually remarked this and hurried back home without further thought. With the staple food, he could now perform the ritual. When the second-floor tenants had all left, Steve didn't rush to perform the ritual but first translated Fusheng Xuanwang Xianjun into ancient Fusak script and rune script, planning to try again in the local language the next day if the original spell didn't work. After all, considering the differences between 2 worlds, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. As for translating into the ancient Hermes script used for prayers and rituals, Steve found it difficult due to his limited vocabulary. After completing all this, he pulled out 4 rye breads from the paper bag, placing one in the corner where the coal stove used to be, another on the inner bottom side of the dressing mirror, another on the top of the cupboard at the junction of 2 walls, and one amidst the clutter to the right of his desk. Taking a deep breath, Steve moved to the center of the room. He calmed himself for a few minutes before starting to walk in a square pattern counterclockwise. With the first step, he whispered, Fusheng Xuanwang Immortal Venerable. On the second step, he silently prayed, Fusheng Xuanwang Heavenly Lord. Taking a third step, Steve held his breath and murmured, Fusheng Xuanwang Almighty. With the fourth step, he exhaled impure air, meditatively thinking, Fusheng Xuanwang Heavenly Venerable. After completing the steps and returning to his original position, Steve closed his eyes, waiting for the results with a mix of anticipation, anxiety, hope, and fear. Can I go back? Will it work? Will anything unexpected happen? The darkness in front of him tinged with a deep red brought by the light. His mind a turmoil of thoughts, unable to calm down. Just then, he suddenly felt as if the air around him had stopped moving, becoming thick and eerie. Soon after, he heard whispers near his ears, now fine, now sharp, now surreal, now tempting, now frenzied, now insane. Even though he couldn't understand the murmuring voices, Steve couldn't help but listen and try to distinguish them. His head began to hurt again, the pain as sharp as if a steel drill was inserted into it. Steve felt his head was about to burst, his thoughts all tinged with hallucinations. He knew something was wrong, trying hard to open his eyes, but he couldn't perform this simple action. His entire body tensed up as if about to snap, and a self-mocking thought surfaced. Not trying to die doesn't get you killed. Quote, he couldn't bear it any longer. Just as the string in his mind was about to snap, the chaotic overlapping whispering voices receded, and the surroundings became very quiet. The atmosphere eerily floating. Not just the atmosphere. Steve felt his body was also floating. He tried to open his eyes again. And this time, it was much easier. A pervasive gray mist filled his vision. Nebulous. Blurry. Boundless. What's going on? Steve looked around in astonishment. Then looked down to find himself floating at the edge of an infinite gray mist. The mist flowed like water, dotted with deep red stars of various sizes. Some large, some small, some hidden deep, some floating on the surface. As he looked at this holographic-like scene, Steve, half confused and half exploratory, reached out his right hand, trying to touch a deep red star floating nearby, looking for a way out. Just as his fingertip touched the surface of that star, ripples emerged from his body, causing the deep red to burst out like a dreamy firework. Startled, Steve hastily withdrew his right hand, accidentally touching another deep red. Consequently, this star also shone brightly. Then, Steve felt his head go blank, his spirit dissipating. In the capital of the Kingdom of Rune, Beckland, in the Queen's District, inside a luxurious villa, Audrey Hall sat in front of a dressing table, caressing an ancient patterned copper mirror with a cracked surface. Magic mirror. Magic mirror. Awaken now. I command you to awaken in the name of the Hall family. Quote. She tried one phrase after another, but the mirror showed no response. After several minutes, she finally gave up, pursed her lips in frustration, and muttered softly, Dad was indeed deceiving me, always telling me this mirror was a treasure of the ancient Solomonic Empire's Black Emperor. An extraordinary item. Before she finished speaking, the copper mirror on the table suddenly emitted a deep red glow, enveloping her. Above the Sanine Sea, an antiquated three-masted sailing ship navigated through a storm. Algernon Wilson stood on the deck, his body swaying with the motion of the ship, effortlessly maintaining his balance. Dressed in a robe embroidered with lightning patterns, he held an oddly shaped glass bottle in his hand, with bubbles churning inside, frost gathering into snow, and traces of wind scraping across. Only missing the blood of a ghost shark, Algernon murmured. Just then, a deep red burst occurred between the glass bottle and his palm, instantly engulfing the surroundings. Above a gray-white mist, Audrey Hall regained her sight, looking around in terror and confusion, and noticed a man with a blurred head and indistinct figure making similar movements nearby. Almost simultaneously, they spotted a mysterious figure shrouded in gray-white mist not far away. Mysterious man. Steve was equally stunned. Sir, where is this? Quote. What do you intend to do? Quote. Audrey and Algernon were initially shocked, fell silent, then simultaneously began to speak.